This is the Beyond Reason Podcast.
Yes, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Reason Podcast. This post 4th of July episode today. You know, I was a little reluctant talking about this at first because I don't know if I wanted to give the person that much attention. I won't even say the person's name. How about that? But everybody's talking about it today, so I guess I'll comment on it. Everyone is talking about what happened at the Statue of Liberty yesterday, where this protester who was protesting ICE, apparently the protestor's an immigrant, was with another immigrant group, Rise and Resist, in New York City. They were protesting ICE, on Liberty Island. And this protester decided it would be a good idea to get the attention, of the American people and to climb the Statue of Liberty, at least climb the pedestal and actually get on the statue. Well, of course, they had to shut down the island because of that, and they had to get police and other law enforcement agencies there and get that person off the Statue of Liberty. And everyone's commenting on this. I'm sure a lot of leftists love it. This is exactly what we need. And, there's one thing I've noticed when it comes to what's going on in the country right now with the political divide and what I've been calling, and a lot of other people have been calling, the lack of civility in our politics. Because when I bring it up, because it worries me, of all the issues going on right now, other than maybe the national debt, what really worries me about the future of the country is our civil society. That our political divide is bleeding over. It's not just Facebook debates anymore. It's not just political debates anymore when you're talking politics or you're voting. It's bleeding over into other parts of our society, and we've seen that recently, and it's really mostly coming from the left. You saw that with Antifa first, really, when Antifa started interrupting speakers on college campuses and basically almost burned down one of the college campuses. And what Antifa has been doing, that's where a lot of it started. But now you have it where members of the Trump administration, they can't eat at certain restaurants. If they do go to certain restaurants, they're forced out because you have protesters constantly yelling at them. You're not allowed to eat. You can't eat in peace because of what's going on at the southern border. Happened to Kirstjen Nielsen, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Recently happened to Scott Pruitt. Then there was something that happened over the weekend that was caught on video where just a guy, a normal teenage kid, was wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Perfectly his right to do it. Some random person came up to him, stole the hat from him, and poured his drink on him. He's just sitting in a restaurant, not bothering anyone. And someone else got so upset, so offended just at the presence of the hat. So, you see a lot of this discourse on Facebook, on social media, on Twitter especially, and it gets pretty nasty, but at least it was just there. You could leave the social media world and you could go to your normal life, and we would still have a normal everyday American experience where we could all peacefully live together with one another. Yeah, there was protests in time. I'm not against protest. I was a part of the Tea Party protests. But the Tea Party protests were organized protests like have been happening in this country since its founding. Organized protests, and most of them, they rented out space, got permits, and did it right. Otherwise, they would go in public places. But then it bled over. You had Antifa. You had Occupy Wall Street causing trouble on Wall Street. You had a lot of the Black Lives Matter protesters getting in the way of highways. You have this political debate going on in the country, and political debate's fine. And yes, political debate can get ugly. I understand that. Trust me, I'm in this business. But what bothers me now is it's bled over into everyday American life, where we can no longer peacefully disagree with each other and peacefully coexist with each other. Now, I say no longer. I mean, for the most part, we still can. Okay, it's still on the fringes right now, but it worries me because it seems to be growing and growing and growing. And that seems to be, this latest example is what happened at the Statue of Liberty, where you had people on both sides of the political aisle, I'm sure, who just wanted to visit the statue, and they were interrupted because of protester. And when I bring up this topic to a lot of people on the left, to a lot of Democrats, to a lot of anti-Trump people that say this is not good, I don't like it when either side does this. I criticize the Trump supporters who interrupted that play There was a play going on at a park where they kind of depicted Caesar as Trump, and then Caesar was getting assassinated, and it looks like Trump is getting assassinated. And you had pro-Trump people interrupting that play. They were shouting during it, and you had to stop it and everything else. And I said, no, let's not do that. Our side should not do that. We should understand that they have freedom of speech as well. But now it's going on both sides. Well, it's mostly going on the left. And every time I bring this up to Democrats, every time I bring this up to people on the left, usually what they'll tell me is things are so dire right now that, of course, we're outraged. That we have to do stuff like this because we're in such a crisis right now. Don't you understand, Mike? Because Trump is president. We're in such a crisis right now that we have to do stuff like this to get everyone's attention to save democracy. And then you have people like Bill Maher saying, I hope for a reception to save democracy. You know this? Things are just so desperate right now. And that's the argument I hear all of the time. That, of course, we're outraged. We have to be outraged. Human rights are being violated. The country is tearing itself apart because of Donald Trump. And then I think to myself, really? I understand there's problems, but there's always been problems in this country. There are always going to be issues that are debated in politics in this country. It's one of the beauties of this country, that the normal everyday American can have a voice in the tough issues of the day and then vote on it. And normally, or run for office or politically organize. That's good. That's fundamentally American. I think that's a great thing. But to act like that this country is in such dire straits right now, that the outrage that we're seeing that's bleeding over into the civil society is warranted, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. We still live in one of the most prosperous times in the history of the world. Even the poorest in this country, most of them have it pretty well. They have access to running water, indoor plumbing, food, entertainment. Most of even the poor in this country. We have access to information like never before. And the economy is doing really well right now. There are more jobs out there than people looking for them. That's a good thing. There are a lot of other good things. There's innovation in medicine, innovation in technology. In some ways, we're freer than ever before. I know it doesn't seem like that in other ways, but just think about what happened, say, in World War I. So during World War I, you had Woodrow Wilson was president of the United States. And once we got into World War I and he declared war, what the Woodrow Wilson administration did is they basically outlawed dissent against the war in a lot of cases. People were arrested for printing stuff against the war because it was seen as unpatriotic and against the war effort. Arrested and put in jail for dissent against the war. Just political dissent. Just saying their free speech rights. Woodrow Wilson stamped it out. I'm not saying that to be against Woodrow Wilson. I'm just saying that when you looked at, say, what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, that wasn't happening. People weren't being arrested for being against the war. I saw anti-war protests all the time. So my point in bringing that up is in a lot of ways, this country is better than ever. Yes, we have racial problems in this country, but we don't have the segregation in the South like we used to. We don't have Jim Crow laws like we used to. In so many ways, this country is better off than ever. So when people say that it's so bad right now, that we are in such a crisis right now, that outrage is needed, and that really it's not the outrage that's the problem, but it's your side that's the problem. We have to stop your side by any means necessary. What they don't realize is what goes around comes around, by the way. That once they start doing this more and more and more, Trump's side is going to start fighting back, and they're going to start doing the same thing and using the same tactics. In fact, somebody did that to Maxine Waters recently. Some anti-Maxine Waters person was trying to berate her and ask her questions while she was in a hallway in an elevator. And she's like, talk to me in person. Why should I? No, I'm going to berate you here. Maxine Waters wants that for the other side. She has to take it as well. And then people always say to me, okay, yeah, but Trump said things in the campaign that were really nasty. Yes, and I criticized him for it at the time. I didn't like when Trump did it either. This is the point. I'm so sick of this. Well, you started it. What are we, 5? Doesn't matter who started. A lot of times when Trump was saying the stuff he was saying, because Trump is a counterpuncher. That's what he always says it. So a lot of times when he was saying punch a protest or whatever, he was talking about the people who were interrupting his rallies and yelling during his rallies and protesting during his rallies and interrupting it. And he was saying you need to fight back against that. I disagreed with Trump on that. Both sides need to stop with this, because what's happening now is you have this common culture that we have in this country where we go to work, we go do business, we go shop, we go hang out with our families, we go hang out in public places, we go hang out for entertainment in public places. People of all different political stripes do that on a daily basis, interact with each other one-on-one or in groups all the time with all kinds of political differences, and we all get along because being American means you can disagree. And that's good. But now we have this case where you can't do that if you disagree politically. No, you need to be shut down. You're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to go out and have fun with your family. You need to be shut down because we're in such a crisis. And I look at every day in this country and I'm like, really? We have it pretty good. Yes, there are problems, but we have it pretty good. We're not at a crisis point. And I say this to both sides, by the way. I've said it to people who are supporters of Trump who do call for stuff like this, and I say it to the left. So when talking about the Statue of Liberty protester, I guarantee you people on the left were going to say, so what? Good for them. What about the people on the border? We need this kind of outrage because we're in such a crisis. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I really don't. And by the way, all these calls for abolishing ICE, a lot of the Democrats are kind of saying, well, we don't want to abolish it. We want to restructure it. I don't buy a lot of that argument either. They're not doing what they should be doing. That's not why they want to get rid of ICE. They want to get rid of ICE because they want open borders, or at least a lot more open than it is now. They don't want to be tough on illegal immigration, and any kind of organization that exists that will be tough on illegal immigration, they will be against. So let's say we create another organization separate from ICE that's merely for enforcing immigration laws, catching illegal immigrants and deporting them. They'll be against that as well. It doesn't matter the name. It doesn't matter the structure. I don't buy it. It's a convenient political way they're structuring it now, but I really just don't buy it. So, yesterday was the 4th of July, Independence Day. And by the way, I want you to go to my Twitter, at Beyond Reason R, and read a tweet that I retweeted from Brad Meltzer, who's a historian. He had a great thread on Twitter about the Declaration of Independence and Thomas Jefferson and the 4th of July. It was really good, so I would recommend you go read the whole thing. Really good. But there was a poll that came out earlier this week that's done every year. It's been talked about all over the place about how many Americans are proud of their country. And it seemed like, I'm sure you know this by now because it's been everywhere, but more and more people are not proud of their country. And this was done by Gallup in 2001, for instance. That's when it was started. 87% said they were proud to be an American. Now that's not so much. So it's at a declining number. Say they're proud to be an American, with less than 3/4 saying they are, down 6 points from just 2 years ago. The driving force behind this lack of pride is a dip among Democrats, with the number dropping from 45% in 2016 to 32% now who say they are extremely proud. Republicans moved up 6 points in the last 2 years. So when you look at this, you can see that most of this, less and less people are proud to be an American, and most of them are Democrats. Now, it's also in the Republicans, because there's a Republican president now, a Republican Congress, so now Republicans are more proud to be American. But I talked about, when this was brought up on the morning show on Good Morning Orlando, which I co-host and produce, I talked about how one of the reasons I really think this is with Democrats, other than there's a lot in Marxist leftist ideology that just doesn't like the way this country is, if you're a Marxist, if you're on the extreme left, if you go to a college university and hear what the liberals are saying there, of course you're not going to be proud to be American because you focus on all the negative things in our history. And if you focus on all the negative things in our history, you're not going to be proud. Now, every country has negative things. Most countries have a lot more negative things than we do, but that's beside the point. But one of the other reasons I think this is the case is because too many of us, especially on the left, but too many of us align our politics with pride in our country. They align our politics with our patriotism. See, I don't really do that. Even when Obama was president, even when Democrats controlled Congress, I was still proud to be an American. I was still proud of my country. I still understood we lived in the best country on the face of the earth that's ever existed, that we still have it pretty damn good no matter who's in office. But too many in this country on both sides, but really on the left right now, of course, because Trump's in office, they align their politics with their patriotism. And what I mean by that is they're not going to be happy and they're not going to be proud to be an American until a lot of these leftist policies are put in place. You know, like Medicare for all, $15 an hour minimum wage, guaranteed job by the government, guaranteed universal basic income, and so on and so forth. A lot of these big government programs, but also less military spending, stuff like that. That they feel like they can't be proud of their country because we're not leftist enough, we're not Marxist enough, we're not far. Until we implement these policies, how can it be proud? And case in point on that is the Democratic National Committee put out a statement yesterday for the 4th of July. This is what they said. It said, nearly 2.5 centuries ago, a band of patriots gathered in Philadelphia to declare that all men are created equal. Our nation has changed dramatically since those words were first written on parchment. Generation of brave Americans, from service members to civil rights activists, have fought to expand the promise of equality for more Americans and move our country forward in its march towards a more perfect union. Okay, that's not so bad so far. But then it continues on. It says, as we celebrate our nation's independence, we recognize that America's founding promise remains out of reach for too many families. Too many members of our society are still struggling to find a good-paying job or get health care they need. Too many women, LGBTQ Americans, people of color, and people with disabilities still face inequality and injustice across our society. Everywhere we look, our most fundamental values are under attack. Thousands of children have been separated from their parents at the southern border. At our highest court, workers' rights are being taken away, voting rights are under assault, Muslim Americans are being discriminated against for their faith, and women's right to choose is under threat like never before. Man, you read this stuff, you're like, no wonder they're not proud. Everyone's a victim, don't you see? It says the Democratic Party believes that all people are created equal no matter who they are, where they are from, who they love, or how they pray. As we celebrate our nation's independence, Democrats reaffirm our commitment to fighting for those values of inclusion and opportunity for everyone. It's not all bad, but I mean, do you understand what I'm saying here? That is proof of what I'm saying. That Democrats, they can't be proud of their country, even on a statement that's supposed to just celebrate Independence Day, celebrate our founding, celebrate our country. They can't just celebrate the country. They have to talk about how many victims there still are in this society, how much injustice is still going on in this society. And that's just proof of what I'm saying. They can't be proud of the country until all the leftist policies are implemented. And that's a problem. Maybe on the 4th of July, and I'm sure both sides do this as well, but the left did it this time, so I'm talking about it. Maybe on the 4th of July, maybe on Independence Day, we should just celebrate the country, celebrate what we have. Remember all the good things that we take for granted every day in this country, in this society? That we have it better than most in the history of the world, that we're not perfect and we're never going to be perfect. Utopia is impossible, but we have it pretty damn good. And maybe we should just be thankful for a day and celebrate the country for the day and not have the political divides for a day. Is that too much to ask? Well, I guess it is. So like I said, the poll makes perfect sense to me when you read that statement from the Democrat National Committee, because they can't be proud They feel they have to align their politics directly with the pride in their country. They have to align leftist policies, and until those leftist policies are implemented, they can't be proud. What? We don't have a government-run healthcare? This country's so terrible. What? We can't force public employees and the government employees to pay union dues even if they're not in a union. We can't force them to do that. This country is awful. What? We're going to have people on the Supreme Court who want to interpret the law as originally intended? What a terrible country. But that's how they view it. That's how they view it. It's crazy. When I look at this country and I read history especially and compare it to where we are now, I'm just so grateful. How could you not be proud? But that's the way it is. One thing I want to talk about before I end the podcast today as well. Axios released earlier this week a report. It was a leaked report from the White House talking about Trump wanting to change policy dealing with the World Trade Organization. Obviously, Trump has problems with our trading partners and how trade is done between us and other countries. I've talked about that before, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to focus on the economics of it, because the economics of it is a whole different subject. But according to this leaked memo, which you can find on Axios, what basically the Trump administration wants is not only to renegotiate what we have with the World Trading Organization, even though, as it was reported earlier this week, most of the complaints that we give to the WTO are taken up by the WTO and approved. So when we actually have a complaint with our trading partners and we bring it to the WTO, usually it works out in our favor, like 90% of the time. But what Trump wants to do is basically give the president power unilaterally to raise tariffs with our WTO partners when he feels like it. And I'm sure there's a lot of conservatives, a lot of Trump supporters out there who will support this because, the whole, it's unfair. Trade is unfair with other countries. And and the economics of it. And I understand the economics of it, even though I don't agree with it. But I was stepping back and I was thinking, what about the role of government? We need to have these conversations again. It's a big conversation I've had on my show a lot, but is it the role of the executive branch? Is it the role of the president of the United States to be able to raise tariffs, which is a tax? So to raise a tax without Congress, to just do it himself? And people say, well, Congress isn't getting it done. Well, so? It's not supposed to be easy to get stuff done. That's the point. We're supposed to have a limited government where we do things ourselves. But this is not the role of the executive branch. If you are a conservative, even if you agree with Trump on trade, if you are a conservative, you should at least be concerned about giving the president that much power. And that includes what he's doing now. He's raising tariffs on the EU, on Canada, on Mexico, on China, and he's doing it himself. And he's saying he's doing it for national security reasons. We've given the president way too much power to raise a tax on you. And as a conservative, any conservative should be concerned about giving the president that much power. That's a lot of power that we've given him unilaterally without the approval of Congress. Now, Congress isn't stopping them because they're too afraid, which they should. They should take back that authority. It's their authority. It should be approved by Congress. We have to start asking these questions again. What is the role of Congress? What is the role of the executive branch? What is the role of the judicial branch? We don't ask that question anymore. A lot of people on the left think the role of the judicial branch is to basically put forward policies they like. That's not their role. Their role is to interpret the law. If you don't like the law, then change the law. If you don't like the Constitution, then amend the Constitution. But don't expect a judge to rule on something based on empathy. That's not the role of a judge. Justice is supposed to be blind, remember? They're not meant to be empathetic. They're meant to interpret the law. But we don't ask these questions enough, I've noticed. something I brought up, and I need to start bringing it up more and more again. We have to start asking, what is the role of government? We can't just like it now because Trump is in office, and when Trump does things, and we say, oh, well, it's Trump, and I like what he's doing, so I don't care. No. Even if you like it, even if you want to raise tariffs, you have to step back and realize, one, Trump's not going to be in office forever. Republicans are not going to be in power forever. But two, when you give the government that much power, the executive branch especially that much power, you are taking away your liberty. And should we be doing that? Your liberty. And too many conservatives don't seem to care now. They cared when Obama was in office, but because it's Trump, they don't care. And I have a really big problem with that. Another topic I wanted to bring up as well, there's been a lot of talk about the Supreme Court because Anthony Kennedy is stepping down and who's going to replace him. And there has been some talk because we have this real big political divide dealing with the court, and everyone goes crazy every time you have to appoint a new justice. And there was some people saying that maybe we should have term limit for Supreme Court justices. And we need to just accept that the court is political in a lot of ways. And that because it's that way, because it's being appointed by the president, approved by the Senate, that it's going to have some politics to it. And the way to get rid of some of that power, to give the Supreme Court a check, would be term limits. I think I support that. I also support Mark Levin has a book, The Liberty Amendments, came out a few years ago. He also says that a Supreme Court decision should be able to be overturned by a 3/5 majority in Congress or a 3/5 of the state legislatures. And a lot of people didn't like that because they think it makes the court too political. I think the fact is the court is political. And the reason why I kind of support these two things is not for the politics of it, because the judges shouldn't be political, but because the three branches of government were supposed to be co-equal branches. The Supreme Court was not actually supposed to be the final say on what's constitutional. Thomas Jefferson mentioned that when you had the Marbury versus Madison case, and John Marshall was saying basically they have the right of constitutional overview, constitutional review. Thomas Jefferson was coming out and said, you're a co-equal branch. You don't have the final say in what's constitutional. Congress has a say. The executive branch has a say as well. And that's why I kind of support it, because there's supposed to be checks and balances. And a lot of people see the court as a check on the other two branches, which it is, and that's fine. But what's a check on the court? If it's supposed to be a co-equal branch, then there has to be a check on the court as well. And there really isn't. There really aren't many checks on the court. You can impeach a justice, I guess. It's very difficult. That's about it, because they're appointed lifetime, and that's it. And then they have the final say, and they say what's constitutional, and they have no check. And I'm thinking, maybe they need a check. If Congress has a check, if the executive branch has a check, then maybe the judicial branch needs a check as well. And this would be a check, being able to overturn their decision with 3/5 majority in Congress. And I like that it's 3/5 because it needs to be tough. It needs to be a really high bar to be able to overturn a decision. It can't just be a 51 vote. It needs to be a really high bar. And this would obviously have to be done through constitutional amendment. But the reason why I tend to support term limits for a Supreme Court and being able to overturn a decision with 3/5 majority in Congress is because the court has way too much power. I'm always against centralized power. I think all centralized power, especially in government, should have a check. And right now, the court really doesn't have much of a check. The only check they have is that the president really can appoint them. But then they're on the court for life. I think they should have a check. So that's what I support. Maybe you can change my mind on that, but that's kind of why I lean in that direction. So I appreciate you listening to the show today, another edition of the Beyond Reason podcast. Make sure to check out any of my podcasts. You can check out the Beyond Reason radio show. You can check out the Florida Roundtable. You can check out when I fill in for Bud on Good Morning Orlando. And you can check out as I co-host Moment of Clarity. That's all on the Beyond Reason Network podcast stream. Just go to any of the Beyond Reason, anywhere you can find the Beyond Reason podcasts. You can find all of those shows as well. You can go on iHeartRadio, search Beyond Reason Network on iHeartRadio, search Beyond Reason Network on iTunes. on SoundCloud and all that stuff, on YouTube, and it is there. Appreciate you listening to the show, and well, I'll catch you guys next time.